What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, yes, you read it right, we're going to be lowering this 2006 Chevy HHR. But we're not only lowering it, we're going to be doing front end, steering, struts, rear shocks, and springs. I'm the kind of person that when I do something, I like to make it a little bit better, and I've been wanting to lower this vehicle for years. Just for aesthetic purposes, I like lowered stances. While I'm doing the suspension, I'm gonna pop in some brand new lowering springs. I looked online for these lowering springs. These springs that I got are for a Chevy Cobalt. They were considerably cheaper than the ones for the HHR. And I've done some online research. I'm not 100% sure, but it looks like these springs are the exact same springs as a Chevy Cobalt. The spring company says no, but I compared both vehicles' gross weight, and they're within 150 pounds of each other. So they're right there, I mean, they're the same weight. Just as long as they're the same springs, I don't see why they won't work. And that's all positive as far as I'm concerned. If you were thinking about lowering this kind of vehicle, I'm gonna be your test dummy to see if this works out. If it works out for me, it'll work out for you. You're probably looking at me right now and noticing that I have a lift in my garage. And yes, I've had the lift as far as I've had the channel. Can't get the lift to lift anything more than 2,000 pounds. Still doesn't work. But that's for another time. I have an appointment for an alignment very soon, and I want to get this all done before I get it aligned. With that being said, let's get to work. So I've taken the liberty of taking both rear tires off, and I've sprayed down the bolts for the rear shocks. Now, you might be asking, why am I starting with the rear first? Because if I have any doubt about these springs not working, it's with the rear. I'm not 100% if they're going to fit back here, so I want to do these first, so this way I don't go through all the trouble of changing the front and then realize I got to take everything back out because the rear springs don't work. So we're going to start with the rear. My apologies for the motor running in the background. It's about 90 degrees out today and I have the AC on in the shop. Take out the rear shocks and springs. You must loosen up both bolts for the shock. Taking the shock out, they are an 18 and a 21 millimeter. I'm gonna try to remove the brake hose from its brackets. This way it gives me a little more slack. Okay, now that I got all this taken care of, I'm gonna go to the other side and do the exact same thing. But before I do that, I wanna make sure that I support the rear swing arm so there's no damage done to the brake hoses. Now, since everything is disconnected, I'm going to lower down the swing arm and see how much trouble these springs are going to give me coming out. If anything, I might have to use a spring compressor. We'll see. If I'm correct, I should just be able to wedge the pry bar and just pry the spring out. It should just be held in there by tension. Best way to get that out, just twist it. Like 2 snaps and a twist.
2 snaps, a twist?
These pop out pretty simply. I mean, I believe it's gonna work. I feel like they'll fit. All right. So it looks like they're gonna fit. It looks like everything's gonna work out. It looks like it's from here. We're gonna find out though. Let me get the other one out. Forgot to mention before, these are supposedly a 2-inch lowering spring. Before I lifted the vehicle in the air, I measured the wheel wells to see how much of a drop this is gonna give us. And just like that, the rear Cobalt springs are ready to go in my HHR. Let's give this a shot. Brake line back up. Let's throw the shock back in. Take off that ribbon and it's gonna be like a catapult. Pardon me. All right, let's get the bolt started and drive her home. See if I did any damage. Yep, just like that. All right, folks, wheels back on, car on the ground, and that's what we got. I think it was 28.5 inches before. I'm gonna check it right now. It's kind of doing the Carolina squat. The only thing that I've noticed with this, and this has nothing to do with the springs, is the shocks in the back. I think the shocks are too long. For some reason, this car gets lifted, not by the swing arm. The springs are gonna pop out of their home. So I'm probably gonna have to get myself a pair of lowering shocks that don't extend as far as these shocks do. But other than that, I'm happy with it. It didn't take long. The back only took maybe an hour with recording. Yep, we were at 28.5 and now we're at 26.5. So I lowered it around 2 inches. Remember to always take caution when you're changing springs and your struts. Those springs are under a lot of pressure, so you don't want to just take the cap off because it'll explode, it'll shoot up in your face.
Out of my face! Out of my face!
You're going to want to get yourself some kind of a spring compressor. Once you get those clamps on, you simply just compress the springs and take off the cap. Once you see that the spring is loose in the set, then you can take your cap off. And you just simply put your new lowering springs, your cap, everything back on, tighten it up. And that's it. That's all it entails. All right, now on to the front. I took the liberty of raising the car in the air and taking the front wheels off just to make it a little less boring. I put a wheel chock in the back. It's on jack stands. We're safe. This isn't really a hard job. It's just when you're doing it on the ground, it makes it just that much harder. It wouldn't be bad if I had actually had a lift. Oh wait, I do have a lift. Well, let's put it this way. It wouldn't be bad if I had a lift that worked. There you go. I just cut the sway bar in link because this way you have nothing you have to worry about. It's cut, it's out of the way. All you gotta do now is just remove the one rusty stud and nut from the back sway bar right there. I'm gonna start by removing the lock nut for the CV axle. That nut is a 30 millimeter. Probably don't have to do that, but I'm just gonna give myself a little extra wiggle room. Loosen up these two 18 millimeter nuts and tap out the studs. I'm gonna get under the brake rotor with a jack just to support it. Separate those wires, this way they're not pulling on anything and have a risk of damaging anything. All right, now I'm gonna tap those two little bastages out.
You sneaky bastard!
I'm putting the nut back on so we don't damage the threads. Don't forget, like I said, once you do this kind of work, once you change these components in the front end, you gotta go get the car aligned. Otherwise you'll be wearing tires like a mother.
Like a mother.
Like a mother.
Like a mother.
Now, so once you get those two bolts out, we're gonna go to the top of the engine compartment, and down in there you got these 313 millimeters. Just loosen up those 313s, and then your strut will be ready to fall out. Looks like it's time for a new battery. Then you just grab yourself a pry bar. Pretty much drop right out. Oop. Just like that.
One dead battery later.
Well, I just made a nice little segment of how great my induction heater works. By heating up the bolt, getting it good and hot, it loosened it up 1, 2, 3. But guess what? I didn't have the camera running like a fool. I'm going to use it later on when I do the tie rod, so stay tuned. Anywho, we got the remainder of the sway bar end link off. All right, now we're going to take out the lower A arm, which is basically these two bolts over here. There's a bolt going up through the subframe. I'm going to loosen up the tie rod end, tap it out, so this way I get it out of the way. Okay, it's loose. All right, If that's off, we're just gonna smack it with a hammer.
Smack it with a hammer.
If you're going to smack this with a hammer, make sure you keep the nut on it so you don't damage the threads. But I'm replacing it, so jingle bangle. And the ball joint is going up through. There's a bolt going through with a nut. You gotta loosen up the bolt, tap the bolt out totally. It's like a provision on the side of the shaft for the ball joint that you gotta pull the bolt all the way out first, and then the ball joint should drop down. Falls out just like that. Now you install your lower control arm. As you're sliding that in simultaneously, you gotta get it kind of lined up with everything else. It's all at the same time. It means you gotta put the ball joint in the bottom of the spindle, and you gotta line up the holes for it to mount. It's like you need a third hand or something. Before I do anything, I'm gonna sneak the bolt in for the ball joint, so that's basically secured. By doing that, take the jack, you put the weight on the ball joint so everything settles, and then the bolt goes directly right in. Just like that. Put the nut on the end. Now with that ball joint bolt started, let's put this bolt in. Once you get the hole lined up, makes it a lot easier. And you can just, once it's semi-lined up, the bolt has like a point to it. You can just basically put the point in the hole and it'll locate where it's got to go. Okay. If anything, you use a hammer to help you. Don't kill it though. There you go, just like that. When you put that bolt back in, you don't tighten this bolt up until you have weight on at least this part of the car, at least this wheel. Otherwise, it can cause premature wear on that bushing. I don't know about you, but I don't want to do this job again.
Hell no!
So you can run it up, but you don't tighten it. You just leave it kind of loose. Just like that. All right. Now that we got that bolt in, I'm going to put these 2 bolts in here with the caps and just drive them home. All right, once that's all snugged up and you get your strut assembly, we're going to take the nuts off of it and you shove it up in the wheel well. If you don't have a helper, just use the jack. Once you get 1 nut star, you're good to go. You just line up your 2 bolts, tighten up the 2 bolts on top. Let's drive these 2 bolts home. You could probably get away with not even removing that nut. I just did it just in case. I didn't want to pull any CV axles out of the transmission. Okay, now it's time for the famous induction heater. So this is seized on there, or it's tight anyway. Let's put it this way: it's tight. Everything's rusted. You're gonna want to put your induction heater over it. Put it back in its slot. All right, connect it, obviously. And then basically all you gotta do is just push the button. Give it a few minutes, wait till it gets good and hot. Let's start smoking off some nice toxic chemicals. And all you gotta do is take a deep breath and loosen it up. Not a paid sponsor, just a good working tool. I mean, if they wanted to sponsor me, I would definitely appreciate the opportunity. Here you go. 1, 2, 3. And you just put in your Mr. Cotter pin. Now to correctly tighten up that rubber bushing, put the weight of the vehicle on the lower control arm. Snug it up. And pop in the egg leg. All right, now that everything's all snugged up, the only thing that's left to do is grease up all the fittings and clean my greasy fingerprints off the brakes. Catching up the other side. Oh yeah, low rider. That's good. It's not too low. I like it. It's going to settle a little bit too. All right, guys, it's a week later. The other day I determined that I needed shocks that extend less than 15 inches. So I went online and I got these from Amazon, Speedway Motors. These are 14 5/8 these extend to. These are going to go on the swing arm to help the springs stop popping out of the spring pockets. Yep. How did I determine what size I needed? Well, let me tell you. I jacked up the vehicle by the vehicle's unibody, and I lowered down the swing arm right before the springs popped out of the spring pocket, measuring the distance between the center of both loops. So I went on Amazon and I found shocks that only extend to 14 5/8 to keep the springs in the spring pocket. Let's install these two puppies. So the bottom bolt, the 21 millimeter, does not fit inside the sleeve for the shock loop. So what I decided I'm going to do is I'm going to try to make a shock loop press. Try saying that 3 times fast. I'm going to take a socket on one side of the shock loop, put one of the new shock loops that don't fit on the other side, and I'm going to try to push it through. I'm going to try. My luck, it probably won't work, but we're going to give it a shot anyway. Sometimes you got to get custom. Sometimes when you're customizing vehicles, even though this is a mild custom, you got to try to make things work. This looks like another job for the induction heater. Pressed out the old bushing with the sleeve inside of it from the old shock. But looking at it, it looks like the sleeve is vulcanized inside the rubber, meaning it's glued in there by heat, basically melted in there. So I'm going to use my induction heater, heat it up to unvulcanize it from the inside of the bushing. Just like so. Mucho caliente. There you go. Once that sleeve cools off, it should be good to put in the vehicle. Just like that, the shock is back in the vehicle, and now for the swing arm test. Perfect. So now we know that those shocks are going to work for this vehicle. Okay, now that everything's all finished up, it's time to take it to the car wash.
Went to the car wash.
Gotta love the lowered life. And that's right, folks. We ruined another one. So that right there is how you lower a vehicle on the cheap. So thank you for watching. If you liked the video, smash that like button and consider subscribing. And we'll see you next time on A Patriot's Touch. Have a nice day. Now we just loosen up 2 15s, holding it onto the subframe. It falls out. Yeah, right. Oh, fuck. Oh, I'm gonna be able to move tomorrow with an extension, and you can get on it and zip it off. Possible. Nope. Okay, so what we're gonna do is go from the other fucking side. This is a booger. This is a real booger.